The Desire Housing Project, a Hano-managed property located in the Upper Ninth Ward, will be deemed as one of the most crucial projects in the city. The build of the Desire was authorized by the Housing Act of 1949. Construction of the Desire project will begin in 1949 and be completed by 1956. Cut off from the rest of the city, the Industrial Canal, Florida Canal, and railroad tracks on all four sides, the D contained 262 two-story buildings featuring 1,860 apartments, making it, at the time, one of the largest housing projects in the country. By the 1960s, the Desire project housed more than 13,000 residents on a plot of land slightly less than 100 acres in actual size, making it the area with the greatest population density in New Orleans. Two elementary schools, Houghton and Lockett, were included in the construction of the Desire housing projects. Many of those moved into the housing projects have been displaced by urban renewal projects elsewhere in the city. Situated on swampland that had formerly been the site of a landfill, the Desire project buildings were poorly constructed using wood and brick veneer to cut costs and will fall into despair within a few years of occupancy. Funding derived from Lyndon Johnson's War on Poverty programs helped bring in a new community center, pool, daycare center, and health clinic. September of 1965, Hurricane Betsy swept through New Orleans. The bottom floor apartments within the Desire housing projects were inundated with floodwater. Wind and water damage destroyed trees and shrubs throughout the project. Little was done by Hano to repair the damage caused by the hurricane. In 1970, the New Orleans Committee to Combat Fascism, the NCCF, a Black Panther shoot-off, not the actual group as most of you uneducated commenters on history like to believe, moved to the Desire project and began organizing within the community, implementing their free breakfast program as well as other initiatives. Unbeknownst to many, Brother Malik Rahim was one of the early leaders who formed the actual New Orleans Black Panther chapter. The NOPD would engage in two shootouts with the NCCF in an effort to purge the group from the neighborhood. Members of the group would later be arrested. In 1971, Hano planned to modernize the D, but the plans were eventually deemed too costly. In 1975, Hano would use funds from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to perform deferred maintenance and other improvements. Over the 1970s and 1980s, the Desire would undergo a steady outward migration of residents. Ongoing deterioration of the buildings as well as a steady increase in crime will contribute to the outflow. Historically, the Desire was known as the city's most dangerous project and would be documented as being one of the deadliest communities in the country. Starting in the late 1960s, most of the crime would be from residents having few economic opportunities and thus fighting for income made available by the 11-5 trade. When that hard arrived in the mid-80s, crime rate in the D would increase even further as crime would infest the project. Residents will begin moving out to flee the physical and social decay. Abandoned apartments will provide convenient places to stash. Deals and crushings will become commonplace in the D. The alleys and courtyards in the D will become a place where former residents will claim that life was often considered worth less than a pair of new tennis. The upstick and deletions will give the D a reputation for violence along with the nearby Florida, aka Florida projects. If you know, you know. This all being during a time that deletions were so bad in the NO that the NOPD would celebrate 350 crushings compared to 413 crushings a year before, which was a mere 15%. Not even enough to put a dent in the crushings. The crime rate in the D would be 300% above the entire nation. The 9.5 acres of land encompassed by the D has many stories. One of those stories will be that of Len Davis, the Hardy Boys, and Kim Groves. A lot of notorious street figures would hail from the D. Alter, Poolman, Sterling, Lloyd, Slugger, Curry, Freddie Smooth, Sean Howard, and Red Trammell, just to name a few. In February of '95, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development would approve a HOPE grant for Hano to improve the living environment through rehabilitation of the project. Mass demolition would begin in 1997. The project would be completely razed by 1999. The D would seem to have taken on a new outlook. Before crime could slow down and residents could fully settle in, Hurricane Katrina would destroy the 318 rental units that were being constructed, as well as 107 rental units that had just been finished and occupied.
But now we're about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
One thing for sure, two things for certain. The city of New Orleans was home to some of the most notorious housing developments in America. These housing developments are called projects. One of the most notorious street figures to be birthed out of the Ninth Ward was Walter Pooh Man Sterling. The Sterling family were no strangers to the N.O., birthing known steppers such as Terrell Turbo Sterling. Born May 29th, 1972, to Miss Brenda Sterling, Walter Pooh Man Sterling was the father of 12 children, one of which is Lamar Peters, a highly acclaimed basketball prospect at the time from the University of Mississippi State.
Holman thought about the three, left open. Possibly got away with a walk. Peters is open.
Pooh Man would be in and out of the criminal justice system ever since his adolescent years. Walter was a stepper, but was also known for being a pretty boy that stayed sharp. If you know, you know. It was once alleged that in the 80s, Pooh Man would pull off a Gennaro meatball author by dressing up as a woman and deleting his ops. With his Sterling family connections, Pooh Man would move around the city with ease. It is rumored that his people, Terrell Turbo Sterling, niece's apartment, was in the same hallway with Killer Stone's mom, Miss Essie. According to Terrence Gangster Williams, Killer Stone would not like this at all and would be waiting in the cut with the yapper.
96, 97 something. Just a couple of people, the Callier Project, Pooh Man, and another old head named Walter Sterling. Pooh Man and Walter Sterling, and another old head named Terrell. But they was old heads, and Terrell had a niece that lived right next to right next to Killer Stone. And one day I pulled up in the driveway, and Killer Stone out in the driveway with a chopper. I'm like, "What's up?" He's like, "Man, they gotta go." I said, "What you mean?" He said, I said, "What they did? They tried to rob you." He said, "No, I don't like the fact that these two known killers next door to my house, in the project next door. This don't sit right with me." So I was like, "Man, the old timer, his niece live right here. His niece, they ain't doing nothing. I don't think we should make this move." So, because I would have had to back him, So we talked, cancel the plan.
Pooh Man was a certified stepper in the streets. No stranger to packing an iron, Pooh Man would always be strapped. In 2016, Pooh Man would plead guilty to being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm. Pooh Man would appeal this conviction, arguing that the courts issued him a steeper sentence based on his criminal background and not the sentencing guidelines. Pooh Man would also argue that the courts didn't take into consideration other mitigating factors. Those factors were: 1, he had established family relationships and was affected by his brother's death. 2, that the best way to prevent being a repeat felon was to treat his drug and not to confine him to the penitentiary. Pooh Man's appeal would be denied and he would be sentenced to 120 months. Upon Pooh Man's release from prison, he would marry Sparkle, the love of his life. This would be huge for Pooh Man, as he was dedicating himself to being a family man and attempting to leave his past behind him. Since his release, Pooh Man had become heavily involved in youth sports and family activities with his kids. The night of January 11th, 2017, Lamar Peters, the son of Walter Pooh Man Sterling, will receive the most horrifying phone call in his life. Early that night, before receiving the call that his father, Walter Pooh Man Sterling, had been shot, Lamar had just talked to his dad about him attending the Mississippi State versus Kentucky game. That, unfortunately, would be the last time that he would speak to his father. Pooh Man would go to a bar with some of his partners. As the night progressed, the DJ would call the license plate number of Pooh Man's car, saying that it needed to be moved. Pooh Man, not knowing what fate was ahead of him, would walk outside to move his car. Immediately after shots would ring out, Pooh Man would be found lying unresponsive with multiple shot wounds at around 10:40 near the intersection of St. Bernard Avenue and Murray Street. One bystander in the crowd would say that she heard the shots. She would say the first shot was like a cannon, something that she's never heard before. Then multiple shots would ring out as if there was a shooting brigade. The bystander, who too was afraid for her life, would leap to the ground and tell the occupants of her home to do the same. This unfortunate turn of events would be disheartening to the Sterling family. Pooh Man's son was merely a freshman at Mississippi State at the time. But would go on to sign with the New York Knicks.